I would like to introduce our main presenter today. So this is Kathy Hansen. She works in our Human Resources Department here on campus, and she has put together a wonderful presentation to kind of demystify the full-time faculty hiring process. So Kathy, please take it away.
Thank you.
And I will be your Vanna White.
Okay, you can be my Vanna White. I like that. I don't have a Vanna White very often. So, well, first of all, thank you for asking me to come and present information. It's really nice to be able to get out of HR and to, meet people that are actually teaching students and the like. So today I'm going to cover three main things in my presentation. The first is I'm going to just walk you through briefly the recruitment process for full-time faculty. I'm going to then talk about the importance of the role that your CV plays in that process. And then we're going to do an exercise with an actual recruitment so you can get the feel for how a hiring committee is screening the various resumes. Okay, so Vanna. Okay, you can go one more. So there are multiple different types of things that come into play when you're putting together a recruitment process. You have state and federal law, you have California Ed Code, you have the Faculty Association contract, and then you have the Pasadena board policies and administrative procedures. Today I just wanted to show you the administrative procedures and board policies here at PCC that kind of in some ways dictate what we do in the faculty recruitment, and there are some that give us some guidance in terms of what we need to do. So I'm going to go over then the overview of the faculty hiring steps. This comes from an administrative policy, and its number, if you want to know, 7210. You can find these policies online. What I do when I want to look for a policy is I'll go to our website and I'll type in board policies, and it'll take me right to the link, and then I can find them. So I want to first say that some of these steps are done sequentially, some are done at the same time, and some of them are a whole process in and of itself. But I'm just going to try to give you kind of an idea of an overview of the process. So the first step, Dr. Juni, or the person in his position, and a committee will come together to identify faculty hiring needs. That's done, we generally have that information before a job fair that we go to in January. And what that committee will do will determine how many positions we have open, in what areas they are. And then that information comes to Human Resources, and that's then when we get involved. So what we do then is we'll break them down, because this past year, I think there were like 47. So we'll break them down amongst our technicians, who then becomes the lead coordinator on that recruitment. So the first step is then preparing the job description or the job announcement. And that is done. The HR coordinator will reach out to the dean and other subject matter experts as deemed appropriate, and have them start looking at that job description to determine, is this what we're looking for? Because we're going to base everything off this process from that job description. At the same time, HR will send out, once we know what positions are going to be open, an email to full-time faculty saying, hey, these positions are coming open. If you want to transfer, here's the process you would go through to transfer into one of these positions. So then the next step in the process is selecting a hiring committee. I have my notes here, and I'm just going to refer to them for this particular piece, because the AP is pretty specific with who sits on that hiring committee. So it says it's done by division. There has to be 5 or more voting members. 1 has to come from an underrepresented group. The dean is normally the chair, but someone else can play that role. 4 or more are full-time faculty, preferably tenured, and 2 come from the discipline or specialty area, and no more than 1 from outside the discipline, division, or program. And then on top of that, there's an EEO representative who's non-voting, and that is that HR tech that's just gonna make sure that the recruitment is fair, that we're following all the laws and all everything that we need to. So then the next step is reviewing the hiring procedures and developing the the evaluation criteria. So the HR tech will coordinate a meeting with the dean and the selected hiring committee, and they will get together. They'll look at the job description or job announcement, and they'll talk about what type of criteria they're going to use to select the person. So they're going to talk about criteria on how they're going to screen resumes. They're going to talk about criteria on what they're going to ask in the interview, because you can't get everything off of a resume. And they're going to talk about, do we want to see a teaching demonstration? Do we want to see written material? What is it we want to see, and how are we going to score that? So that happens, it happens throughout the process, but at that step in particular. Okay, and then after that's all figured out and the position is flown, which we mean advertised, and the period to apply has ended, then the tech will get the committee together for reviewing and screening of the applications. And that's kind of where we're going to spend most of our time, because in the first step of the process, the committee will screen the CVs, your CVs and your other application materials. That's going to determine whether you're going to get in and be able to go through that process or go to the initial interview, or whether we're going to be sending you a letter, saying, unfortunately, there were a lot of qualified candidates, which we're all familiar with that letter, unfortunately. So, and then, okay. Number 6 is preparing for the initial interviews. And at that step, the people that the committee wants to interview have been selected. They come to HR. HR will do a double check just to make sure they meet the minimum quals. And then the EEO rep at that point in time will also do an analysis, because it's really important that we make sure that our screening criteria is not screening out any particular group or any, male, female, anything like that. And if the rep finds that, ooh, this looks strange, we had this type of composition in the pool, but now we're down to just this composition that's going through the interview, they will come and talk to one of the managers in HR, and then we'll make the determination on, we might not go forward at that point in time with that recruitment. We may extend the recruitment and then go out and do some targeted advertising to make sure that we have a really diverse pool. Okay, step 7 is conducting the initial interviews. Sorry here. So the committee will conduct the initial interviews. They're going to have come up with their screening criteria, their questions, and they're going to ask these very specific questions to every single person that they're going to see. And they're going to have a scoring sheet that they've developed that they're going to score each candidate on that particular interview. And the AP that I was referring to asks that they deliberate at the end of their interviews and make a recommendation of at least 3 candidates to go to the next step. Sometimes there's 2 candidates, but generally we like 3. And at that point, then the dean may start conducting preliminary reference checks, kind of just checking things out if he or she has time. And then the follow-up interviews, this is where we would add Dr. Juni's position, who is the Senior VP or Assistant Superintendent of Academic and Student Affairs, or his designee. And there may then be members from that initial hiring committee sitting with him, or he kind of determines who he's going to have sit with him and make that final decision. Then he and that committee will interview folks, again, using very specific questions to get specific information, and then they'll make a recommendation of who to send to be interviewed by the president. And then the president will interview the candidates and then make the decision as to who we're going to hire. So, oh, yes.
How many applicants get to the initial interview? Is there a
It can
number?
be, well, you know what, I don't think it's a defined number. I think it's how many positions we have open. I think it's the number of qualified candidates that panel sees, because they may want to see, more or see less. So it's really up to them. Oh,
I think in my years here, I've seen as few as 6 and as many as 20 at that first level.
okay. Oops. Okay.
Kathy, did I hear right? So are there 3 interviews total? Or?
There's an initial, and then there's the one with Dr. Junie, and then there's the one with the president. So yes. Okay, so I wanted to focus on the CV for today. So before you write or modify your CV and pull together all the other requested materials from what you're going to get from the job announcement, I highly recommend you take the job announcement, you print it out, and you highlight it, because it gives you a ton of information. Because remember, we're going to the committee for the screening process is relying on that document to determine what they're going to be looking for. So it gives you like the responsibilities of the position, it tells you what the minimum qualifications are, the desirable qualifications, skills, knowledge, and abilities, what the process is going to be, the steps in the process. So if you're going to have to turn in written material, do a teaching demonstration, and it tells you what supporting documents are going to be required for you to apply. So then on the next slide, I have some application tips. And so this I just kind of pulled together from doing this for like 30 years, going through resumes. You want to make your CV match that position and the qualifications that you're seeing in that job application or job posting match as much as you possibly can. Because I was mentioning to some of you here earlier that your application, in the one case we're going to look at, would have been one of 300. So you can imagine a panel coming, having to review all 300 applications. You're going to want to show, okay, here's how I meet minimum qualifications, here's how I meet the desired qualifications. If you know that it says there's some project going on or something that you may be involved with. If you've done something in the past, you may want to put that into your cover letter. But what you're really trying to do, and I highly recommend, is tailoring that CV to that job announcement. I also think it's important to understand the recruitment process. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, in the CV, so if you have accomplishments on campus, you can include that in the CV itself, in addition to writing about it in the cover letter.
Sure.
Yes. I'm just going to say, when you're on a committee that has more than 300, some people may spend a lot of time with the CV and skim the cover letter. Some people may prefer to spend a lot of time on the cover letter and skim the CV. So I would make sure that regardless of what the screening person's priority is,
Highlight.
that you have everything in both.
I think that's a really good point.
Hi.
And
Sorry. Go ahead.
this is a follow-up. And when you say highlight, what does that mean? Is that put it in bold? Does it put it in a certain part of the CV?
It's really on your style. You can still have your CV, your style, but it's making it easy to find, however you want to do that. Do you want to include that as like a bullet point? Do you want to highlight it? You can do what you want, but making it easy for that person that's screening all of those to find, first of all, minimum qualifications, and then second of all, the desirable qualifications. The last bullet down there, research the college, department, and division, especially current events. I recommend doing that at this point, because if you can find out if there's something in particular going on or something that college is a big initiative, then you could also put some of that into your cover letter, put it in your CV, and that never hurts. So now, this is hard to see, so I'm gonna blow it up, but this is an actual, oh, I'm sorry, I keep missing your.
I was just gonna ask, like, I've had a cover letter that's like 4 pages, and some colleges, they say that's good, and some, they only want 2. What would you recommend?
This is a personal preference, generally of the screener. I recommend a 1 or 2 page, but I mean, academia, I know that there are sometimes longer cover letters, but it depends on the size of the recruitment, because if it's like, if we're looking at 500, let's say, and that's an extreme here, then,
I want it shorter.
yeah, you're probably gonna be scanning that and looking more at the CV.
Okay. And it's okay for us to ask, like, how many applicants, right?
We don't usually share that because,
Okay.
you know, it's just not, it doesn't seem relevant, but you know, I'll tell you on campus, like this one that we're looking at right here, which is a general counselor, had 300. There's some that have much less, like you get into the sciences and stuff, and sometimes we have less than that, but I just picked one.
I would just add, I think it would be very hard to convey that you've done enough in less than maybe 1.5 to 2 pages. So kind of what I've seen, kind of 2 for full-time faculty, 4 for vice president, 6 for president, something like that, depending on how many qualifications they're looking for.
What about the length of the CV?
That to me, I don't have a preference as long as you get across what you need to get across.
Minimum versus desirable qualifications. In the past, I've heard of an adjunct faculty member who has a doctorate, apply for the full-time, and not make it to the first interview. And that doctorate is a desirable qualification. How does that work into the process?
Well, you may get your answer if you let me. If I don't answer it when we go through this scoring sheet, then ask me again, and I'll make sure we address it. But if you go, so this is the one for the general counselor scoring sheet. This is the actual scoring sheet that was used in a recruitment. On the bottom, you'll see is kind of down here is the rating criteria. The committee comes up with that, and as you can see here, they can rate some things more importantly than others. You know, they can give 10 points for certain types of experience, and that's all up to them. So let me,
I can hand these out.
okay.
Kathy,
Yes,
do you think you're gonna share these slides with us?
she has them right now. Yes. I didn't know whether to do it in the beginning or the end, because if you do it in the beginning, everybody's flipping through, right?
Yeah.
You guys know as instructors,
Yeah.
right? So sometimes it's better to hand it out at the end. So,
Now, this scoring sheet is not, you're not made aware of this as an
no,
applicant.
I'm giving you a behind-the-scenes look.
Right.
This is a behind-the-scenes look. This is that committee that is screening and doing the screening for the position. So do you mind, Vanna? So here's the first half of that sheet, and so you can see this committee looked at minimum qualifications. They listed it out, and their first question on each particular CV was, did they meet the minimum quals, yes or no? Then this committee looked at, is the application complete, yes or no, and that's what was required, which is why I say it's really important to read that job announcement, because we have, you can imagine if there's 300 applications coming in, one easy way to screen some of those out is if you don't give us all the information we need to make a decision, then, you know, so it's really important, yeah. And then they looked at the different types of experience that they had, and again, they weighted them. Do you want to go? This is the other half of the sheet. So they wanted to make sure, you know, they had demonstrated cultural competency, and that there were some special projects they were interested in, if they had experience in, and organizational skills. So this just gives you an idea, and on this particular recruitment, the most an applicant could get was 54. That varies because the hiring committee determines what points they're assigning at the bottom there, so the number varies, but that was in this particular recruitment. So the next, do you mind? Okay. So scoring the application materials. So what happens is we make all of the applications available to the hiring committee, and the hiring committee initially scores everything individually. So there's a lot of work going into these large recruitments because we're asking people to look at all 300 applications and to score them. Once that's all completed, the scores come to HR, usually electronically, and then we compile them all into a great big spreadsheet with everybody's name down, all the criteria and their total scores. And then what happens is the committee comes back together and they will show the committee, that HR Tech will show the committee the scoring sheet. And they'll see, some people may have scored somebody low in certain areas and someone else higher. And at that point, they have a discussion because it's kind of a way to take out, because there's so many applications, if somebody missed something, let's say, I scored them low and you scored them higher, you have the opportunity at that time to say, well, I saw this, this, and this. And I may go, oh my gosh, I didn't get that, and let's talk about that. And they're given the opportunity then to change their score if they'd like to.
And this is with all of the applicants.
Well, yes, with all of them. Generally, I'll tell you that in the 300, they're probably looking towards the top, because if everybody scored everyone really low, they're not going to talk about them.
Are the scores dependent also on seniority based on years of experience as an adjunct?
If the committee puts that in as a criteria, they don't usually specify like that. They usually specify types of teaching experience and that which you could get as an adjunct. That's generally how it would come into play here.
So basically, when you get those in, it's like your first two columns. If you get a no on one of those in the first two columns, there's no need to go any further.
Well, we make even if they're saying in the faculty recruitment, even if they're saying the application is incomplete, we make them fill out this entire score sheet. And I'll tell you, in certain instances, it's really depending on the dean, the hiring chair. There are times that we'll go back, especially if it's a small recruitment and somebody's missing something, we'll actually follow up with them. But in a 300-person recruitment, we're likely not going to have to do that.
So generally, how much experience would you need to qualify for full-time experience?
Can you answer that, Sheila?
It very much depends on the discipline. So there are some areas that value teaching experience very highly. There are others where if you have research or professional industry experience, that is valued. So we have 200 different programs, career and tech ed, STEM, liberal arts. So it really depends on what is a priority of that discipline.
What would be liberal arts, English composition?
I would say that 3 to 5 years of teaching experience, right, that we probably wouldn't feel comfortable investing in a tenure track position for someone who has less than 3 to 5, but that is nothing official, just my kind of expert opinion.
And these scoring sheets are not available to the applicant.
No, remember, this is a behind the scenes. I'm giving you behind the iron curtain, or whatever you want to call it. This is what's going on between the hiring panel and human resources.
But Kiara, having been someone who's developed many of these, we basically take that job announcement, we look at the minimum qualifications, the desirable, the skills and qualities, and we map them into these different criteria areas. So if as you're writing your CV and cover letter, you are ticking off, covered that, covered that, covered that, you're probably going to do well in the scoring by the rubric.
That's why I kept emphasizing that job announcement gives you a ton of information.
Are letters of recommendation required for every position?
Not for every, it depends. It depends on what that hiring committee decides they want at that
And
point.
that information is gonna be on the job posting?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So we ask for letter of recommendations. What is the way to send them? Because sometimes the people writing them, they want them to be confidential.
Yeah, I haven't seen any confidential, but I think I've seen that you can load them up in our applicant tracking system. If they're confidential, obviously, then I believe you could probably bring them in a sealed envelope or have the person send them to us. Have you seen any confidential?
I think that they get directly loaded into Cornerstone.
Okay.
That's what
Okay.
I have
Okay,
seen,
okay.
which is our applicant
Second.
tracking software. So that's where you load your CV, and your application is through that Cornerstone
The
software.
applicant is
So you would be loading it then?
uploading so they are not confidential.
Yeah.
We can follow up on that.
But if they were, I know sometimes like we require transcripts and we require official transcripts. So we'll ask the applicant either to have them sent directly to us, or we ask you to come and bring them in a sealed envelope from the college.
Yeah, sometimes the official transcripts are only requested when you get more into the process, is that true?
Yes, that's
And
true.
they accept unofficial transcripts initially?
Yes, that is true. And then if you got to be one of the folks that we were probably considering hiring, we'd ask you for
For the official
official.
transcripts.
Okay, so the next thing is you guys get to do some work. So